Remember when being a motorcycle cop on television looked like the coolest job in America? A roaring Kawasaki, California sunshine, mirrored sunglasses, and two officers cruising the freeway like they owned the road. That was CHiPs. When the show premiered in 1977, the idea sounded pretty ordinary. Two California Highway Patrol officers patrolling Los Angeles, dealing with traffic accidents, helping stranded drivers, and keeping the highways moving. But somehow, it became a huge hit. Larry Wilcox played the serious and dependable Jon Baker, while Erik Estrada brought the energy as Officer Frank Ponch Poncherello. And behind the famous uniforms and motorcycles, there were plenty of stories that were almost as wild as the episodes themselves. One of the strangest is that Erik Estrada couldn't actually ride a motorcycle when he got the role. Yes, the star of a motorcycle cop show had never ridden one before. Production put him through intensive training, and Estrada reportedly had to make several attempts before passing his motorcycle test. But he learned quickly. Soon, audiences saw him riding like a professional, and nobody would have guessed he had started from zero. There's another interesting story about Ponch. The character wasn't originally created specifically as a Hispanic motorcycle officer. Estrada pushed producers to change the character's background, helping turn Ponch into the Latino hero audiences eventually knew. That became an important part of his identity and helped make the character stand out on television. The show itself also had a rough beginning. When CHiPs premiered, NBC wasn't immediately convinced it had a hit on its hands. The ratings were disappointing, and critics weren't exactly celebrating it. Then the network moved the series to Saturday nights. Suddenly, things changed. Families started watching, younger viewers became obsessed with the motorcycles, and Ponch and Jon became television favorites. A show that almost looked like a failed experiment turned into one of NBC's recognizable hits. And then came a very unusual casting decision. By the fifth season, Erik Estrada was involved in a major contract dispute with the studio. He wanted better compensation as the show's popularity grew, while the studio wasn't prepared to give him what he wanted. Estrada stopped appearing, leaving producers with a huge problem. How do you make CHiPs without Ponch? Their answer was Bruce Jenner, the Olympic decathlon champion who was already a major celebrity. Jenner joined the show as Officer Steve McLeish, temporarily becoming Jon Baker's new partner. It was certainly strange seeing Jon riding around without Ponch. But audiences weren't fooled. They wanted their original partnership back, and eventually Estrada returned. The experiment didn't last long. Another fascinating part of CHiPs is how many future stars appeared on the show before becoming famous. Bryan Cranston had a role years before Malcolm in the Middle and Breaking Bad. Ed Harris appeared before becoming an acclaimed film actor. David Caruso showed up long before his television fame. And Michael Dorn spent time on the series before becoming famous as Worf on Star Trek: The Next Generation. Even Chris Pine has a connection to the show. His father, Robert Pine, played Sergeant Getrayer, the boss constantly trying to keep Ponch and Jon under control. So if you watch old episodes today, you're basically watching a parade of future Hollywood stars before anyone knew how famous they would become. The show was also unusual because Ponch and Jon rarely needed their guns. Unlike many modern police dramas, CHiPs wasn't built around shootouts. The real action came from freeway crashes, motorcycle pursuits, reckless drivers, rescues, and bizarre situations. That was partly because creator Rick Rossner had experience around real law enforcement and wanted the series to feel connected to actual highway patrol work. Of course, television still needed excitement. So an ordinary traffic stop could somehow turn into a massive chase 5 minutes later. That's Hollywood. And then there's the music. One of the composers who worked on CHiPs was Alan Silvestri. At the time, he was still developing his career. Years later, he would become one of Hollywood's biggest composers, creating famous scores for movies like Back to the Future, Forrest Gump, and Predator. So CHiPs was part of the early career of a man who would eventually become a major name in film music. But the most serious story from the series involved Erik Estrada himself. In 1979, Estrada was seriously injured during a motorcycle accident while filming. He was thrown from the bike and suffered multiple injuries, including broken bones and a punctured lung. The accident was so severe that his survival was uncertain. Larry Wilcox was nearby and helped keep Estrada conscious until medical help arrived. For Estrada, it was a terrifying moment. And for the production, it was a reminder that the motorcycle stunts audiences enjoyed could be extremely dangerous. After recovering, Estrada eventually returned to the show. And here's something viewers probably never noticed. Look closely at the backs of Ponch and Jon's uniforms. You may see small pouches attached around their belts. Those weren't special police equipment. They were microphone and battery packs used by the television production. Because Ponch and Jon carried most of the dialogue, they needed their own wireless microphones. It's a tiny detail, but once you know it's there, you'll probably notice it every time you watch an episode. But the biggest behind-the-scenes story was the relationship between Estrada and Wilcox. On screen, Ponch and Jon looked like inseparable friends. Off-screen, the two actors reportedly had a very difficult relationship. Their personalities clashed, and both men have spoken about the tension between them over the years. The rivalry became so personal that they reportedly didn't attend each other's weddings. And eventually, Wilcox left the series. For years, the departure was treated as a normal change in the cast. But Wilcox later claimed that he had actually been pushed out and suggested Estrada had played a role in what happened. Whatever the full truth was, their relationship remained complicated for years. And yet, time eventually changed things. The two actors later reunited and appeared together again, showing that the old rivalry had cooled. That's probably one of the strangest things about CHiPs. The partnership millions of viewers loved was played by two people who weren't nearly as close behind the camera as they appeared on television. Still, the show survived all of it. 6 seasons. 139 episodes. Motorcycles, freeway crashes, comedy, drama, future Hollywood stars, and two officers who became icons of classic television. Even today, there's something instantly recognizable about Ponch and Jon cruising down a California highway. The uniforms. The motorcycles. The sunglasses. And that feeling that somewhere up ahead, another completely ordinary patrol was about to become a crazy adventure. That's the magic of CHiPs. It took one of the most ordinary jobs imaginable and somehow made it look like the greatest job in the world.